All right, y'all, here's part 3, chapter 12, the attack. Sure enough, there were 2 men outside the stockade. One of them was waving a white cloth. The other was Silver himself. They stood knee-deep in a low, white morning fog that had crawled out of the swamp. 10 to 1, this is a trick, said the captain. He called out, "Who goes? Stand or we fire." "Flag of truce," cried Silver. "And what do you want with your flag of truce?" "Truce," cried our captain. "I'm Captain Silver, sir. I'm here to make a bargain," he shouted. "Captain Silver? Who's he?" cried the captain. "Long John," answered. "It's me, John Silver, sir. These lads have chosen me as their captain. All I ask is your word, Captain Smollett, to come to terms. Then let me go freely back." "My man," said Captain Smollett, "I have not the slightest desire to talk to you. If you wish to talk to me, you can come. That's all." "That's enough, Captain," shouted Long John cheerily. "A word from you is enough." Silver came to the fence, threw over his crutch, and got a leg up. With great strength and skill, he climbed the fence and dropped to the other side. Silver had terrible hard work getting up the steep land that led to the blockhouse. His crutch sank in the soft sand, but he stuck to it, and at last arrived before the captain. Silver saluted. He was dressed up in a long blue coat with brass buttons. A fine hat was set on the back of his head. "Here you are, my man," said Captain Smollett. "You had better sit down." "You'll make me sit outside on the cold sand, Captain," complained Long John. "Why, Silver, if you had been an honest sea cook, you might be treated better. But you're a common pirate, and here you'll sit." "Well, well, Captain," said the sea cook. He sat down on the sand. Then he spied me. "The top of the morning to you, Jim. The doctor, too. Why, there you all are together like a happy family. If you have anything to say, my man, better say it," said the captain. "Right you are, Captain Smollett. Well now, that was a good trick last night. One of you is pretty handy with a handspike. But you won't be able to sneak over and kill another man again, I tell you." The captain did not know what Silver was talking about, but I did. Ben Gunn must have paid a late-night visit to the pirates while they lay about drunk. I reckoned that we now had one less enemy to deal with. "Well, here it is," said Silver. "We want that treasure, and you want to save your lives. You have a map, haven't you?" "Perhaps," replied the captain. "Oh, well, you have, I know that," said Long John. "We want your map." Here the 2 men smoked their pipes and eyed each other for quite a while. "Now," Silver went on, "you give us the treasure map. You do that, and we'll offer you a choice. Either you join us, and we splits the treasure with you, and drops you safely ashore somewheres, or you can stay here, you can. We'll leave food and supplies with you. I'll give my word of honor to send a ship back here to pick you up." Captain Smollett rose from his seat on the porch. "Is that all?" he said. "Every last word, by thunder. If you refuse that, the next you'll see are musket balls." "Very good," said the captain. "Now, you'll hear me. If you'll come up one by one unarmed, I'll take you home to a fair trial in England. If you won't, you have my word as an Englishman that I'll see you all to Davy Jones below. You can't find the treasure. You can't sell the ship. I stand here and tell you so. And there, the last good words you'll get from me. Now go, my lad, and double quick." Silver's face turned red. "Give me a hand up." "Not I," said the captain. "Who'll give me a hand up?" Silver roared. Not a man moved. Growling, he crawled along the sand till he got hold of the porch and could get himself upon his crutch. "Before an hour's out," he cried, "I'll crush your old blockhouse like a rum barrel." and with a dreadful curse, he stumbled off and plowed through the sand. The man with the flag of truce helped him over the fence after 4 or 5 tries. Then he disappeared among the trees. "To your posts," roared the captain. "Doctor, you take the door. Hunter, take the east side. Joyce, you stand by the west, my man. Mr. Trelawney, you are the best shot. You and Gray will take this long north side with the 5 loopholes. Hawkins, neither you nor I are good at the shooting. We'll stand by to load muskets and give a hand." The chill and the fog lifted. The sun began to bake the sand. We flung off our jackets and coats and rolled up our sleeves. Then we stood there in a fever of heat and fear. An hour passed away as we waited and waited. And then came the sounds of attack. Joyce whipped up his musket and fired. Shots rang out from all directions. Several bullets struck the blockhouse. Then all was quiet again until we heard a loud hurrah as pirates leaped from the woods and ran straight to the stockade. A rifle ball sang through the doorway and knocked the doctor's musket into bits. The pirates swarmed over the fence like monkeys. Squire and Gray fired again and again. 3 pirates fell. 2 had bit the dust. 1 had fled. But 4 had made it across the fence and into the stockade area. They ran for the blockhouse. The rest of the pirates, still in the woods, shouted and cheered them on. In a moment, the 4 pirates were upon us. The head of Job Anderson appeared at the middle loophole. "At 'em, all hands," he roared in a voice of thunder. At the same moment, another pirate grabbed Hunter's musket and pulled it through the loophole. With one blow, Hunter fell to the floor. Another pirate ran around to the doorway and fell with his cutlass on the doctor. The blockhouse was full of gun smoke. I heard pistol shots and then one loud groan. "Out, lads, out, and fight 'em in the open. Use your cutlasses," cried the captain. I grabbed a cutlass and dashed out the door into the clear sunlight. Someone was close behind me. Right in front, the doctor was chasing an enemy down the hill. The rest of the pirates were now swarming up the fence to make an end of us. One man was on the top with one leg over. He had on a red nightcap and held his cutlass in his mouth. But before he could climb over, the battle was finished and victory was ours. I decided to go find the large white rock where Ben Gunn had hidden a boat. I would slip out when nobody was watching, which I knew was wrong, but I was only a boy, and I had my mind made up. I filled my pockets with biscuits and grabbed 2 pistols, a powder horn, and bullets. When the coast was clear, I made a bolt for it over the fence and into the thickest of the trees. I ran down to the cove and looked out through the trees. I could see the Hispaniola still flying the Jolly Roger. I crept out to the sandy area and crawled as quickly as I could toward the white rock. I reached it before the sun went down. Right below the rock, I found a low place covered with high brush. Here I saw a little tent of goat skins. I lifted the side of the tent, and there was Ben Gunn's boat, a homemade, lopsided round boat made of wood and goat skin. It was very small, even for me. Until then, I had never seen a coracle, this type of round boat made by primitive people. But I can say that Ben Gunn's boat was the worst coracle ever made by man. Yet this strange little boat gave me my next wild idea. I would slip out at night, cut the Hispaniola loose from her anchor, and let her drift ashore. Down I sat to wait for darkness and eat some biscuits. When night came, I waded into the water with my coracle and set myself to sea. The coracle was impossible to steer, no matter how I tried. I could not get her to go straight. Turning round and round was what she did best. Even when I paddled, she turned in every direction but the one I aimed for. Luckily, the tide pulled me toward the Hispaniola. I came alongside of her anchor rope and laid hold. I sliced at the rope with my knife until I had cut the last fibers. Curiosity then grabbed hold of me, and I grabbed hold of the rope. I pulled myself up, hand over hand, until I could see into the cabin. There was Israel Hands wrestling with the man in the red nightcap. Each had a hand upon the other's throat. I dropped back down, frightened by the scene. I could see the glow of the pirates' campfire on shore and hear them singing the song I knew well. 15 men on a dead man's chest. Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. Suddenly, my little coracle tipped in the water and pushed me toward the hull of the Hispaniola. I lay down flat in the bottom of that awful little boat, prayed, and got ready to meet my Maker. I must have lain like that for hours, waiting for death. I could feel the coracle being beaten by waves, and I was drenched with the sea spray. Sleep fell upon me, and I dreamed of home. I woke to find that I had drifted out of the cove. My throat was dry. All around me was salty water that I could not drink. The sun beat down on me, and my brain ached. The spray of seawater caked my lips with salt. I bailed water out with my sea cap, and dreaded drifting out to the open sea. Then I saw, not half a mile away, the Hispaniola. I knew I would be spotted, but I was so thirsty that I was glad of this. I wondered how the ship could have drifted so far. The men on board must be dead or drunk, I thought, or maybe they had deserted the ship. Perhaps, if I could get on board, I could steer the ship and return her to her captain. I drifted closer to the ship. What if there were still men on board? And how tall she looked to me from down in my coracle. But I laid aside my fears and waited for my chance. A large swell lifted my boat. I sprang to my feet and leaped, which pushed my coracle underwater. I caught the jib boom and clung there, panting. I had now lost the coracle and was left with no way off the Hispaniola. I tumbled headfirst upon the deck. All along the side of the deck I saw empty bottles. And then, sure enough, I saw 2 drunk or maybe dead pirates. Redcap was as stiff as a handspike. Israel Hands was propped against the side, his chin on his chest, his face as white as a wax candle. The ship was being jostled about by the waves and the wind that caught her sails. At every jump of the ship, the men swayed back and forth, but gave no sign of life. I saw splashes of blood on the deck, and was sure that they had killed each other. But then, while I was looking and wondering, Israel Hands turned partly around. With a low moan, he sat up. I knew he must be in a great pain, and at first I felt sorry for him. But when I remembered the talk I had overheard from the apple barrel, all pity left me. "Come aboard, Mr. Hands," I said with a slow, sly smile. Chapter 14, y'all. This is Israel Hands. Hands rolled his eyes around and stared at me. "Much hurt?" I asked him. He grunted. "I don't have no luck, and that's what's the matter with me." He nodded toward the man with the red cap. "As for that swab, he's good and dead, he is. O'Brien warn't no sailor anyhow. And where might you have come from?" "Well," said I, "I've come aboard to take this ship, Mr. Hands. You'll please call me captain." He looked at me sourly, but said nothing. "By the by," I said, pointing to the Jolly Roger, "I can't have these colors, Mr. Hands. I'll strike 'em. Better none than these." I ran to the flag lines, brought down their black flag, and chucked it overboard. "God save the king," said I, waving my cap. He watched me keenly and slyly. "I reckon, Captain Hawkins," he said, "you'll want to get ashore now. S'pose we talks." "Why, with all my heart, Mr. Hands. Say on." "Now, look here. You gives me food and drink and an old handkerchief to tie my wound up, and I'll tell you how to sail her." "I'm not going back to the cove," says I. "We'll sail into North Inlet and beach her quietly there." "North Inlet? Why?" "I'll help you sail her there, I will," he said. We struck our bargain on the spot. In 3 minutes I had the Hispaniola sailing easily along the western coast toward the North Inlet that I had seen on the map. Then I went below to my own cabin, where I got a soft silk handkerchief of my mother's. I bound up Hans's great bleeding stab wound in his thigh. I drank some cool water and ate some biscuits. Both of us were feeling better. The breeze served us well. Soon we had turned the corner of the rocky hill that ends the island on the north. I was enjoying my role as captain. I had plenty of water and good things to eat. The weather was pleasant. The only thing that bothered me was Israel Hands' odd smile as he watched and watched and watched me at my work. We reached the north inlet, but of course had no anchor to let down. In order to beach the ship, we would have to wait for the tide to go out. We both sat in silence over a meal. Then Hans said, with his same strange smile, "This here's an unlucky ship, this Hispaniola, Jim. I never seen such dirty luck, not I. There was this here O'Brien, now he's dead, ain't he? Do you take it as a dead man is dead for good, or do he come alive again?" "You can kill the body, Mr. Hans, but not the spirit," I replied. "O'Brien there is in another world, and may be watching us." "Ah," says he. "Well, I do know one thing, I do. Dead men don't bite. That's my view. Amen. So be it. Now, Jim, I'll take it kind if you'd step down into that there cabin and get me a bottle of wine." I knew he just wanted me to leave the deck. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "All right, Mr. Hands," I answered, "but I'll have to dig for it." I scuttled down the stairs and tried to make a lot of noise. Then I slipped off my shoes, ran quietly along the next ladder, and popped my head out of the opening beyond him. He was on his hands and knees. I watched as he pulled himself across the deck and picked a bloody dirk, a 10-inch knife, out of a coil of rope. He hid it in his jacket and crawled back to his old place. So, Israel Hands could move about, and he was now armed with a dirk. I quietly crept back, slipped into my shoes, and grabbed a bottle of wine. I came up the ladder and found Hands just as I had left him. "Here's luck," he said, taking a swig of the wine. "The tide's out now. You just take my orders, Captain Hawkins, and we'll sail slap in and be done with it." I was a good sub-captain, and Hands was an excellent pilot. Starboard a little, so steady," he commanded. "Starboard, larboard, a little steady, steady." We went about and dodged in near the shore. "Now, my hearty luff." I pulled hard, and the Hispaniola swung round rapidly and went straight for the sandy shore. With all the excitement, I forgot to watch Hands. When I looked round, he was already halfway toward me with the dirk in his right hand. We both cried out when our eyes met. Mine was the shrill cry of terror. His was a roar of fury, like a charging bull's. He lunged forward, and I leaped sideways. I drew a pistol from my belt, took a cool aim, and drew the trigger. But there was no flash. The powder was wet from the seawater. Why had I not cleaned and reloaded my only weapons? Although he was wounded, Hands moved quickly. His grizzled hair tumbled over his red, furious face. I knew my pistols were useless, and I knew I could be boxed in against the side of the ship. If that happened, 9 or 10 inches of the blood-stained dirk would be my last experience on this side of life. I placed my palms against the mainmast and waited, every nerve upon the stretch. Hands also paused. He moved to the right. I moved to the left. Right, left, back again. It was like two boys at play dodging around the rocks back home at Black Hill Cove. But you may be sure no boy's heart had ever beat so wildly. I saw no hope of any escape. Suddenly, the Hispaniola struck the beach. The ship shook and leaned over on her side. Water splashed onto the deck. We were tossed in an instant and rolled almost together down the deck. The dead redcap tumbled stiffly after us. My head hit Israel Hands' foot with a crack that made my teeth rattle. I got to my feet, but Hands was tangled with the dead body. I could not run on the tilted deck, and Hands was coming at me with his dirk. Quick as thought, I sprang into the mizzen shrouds, climbed up hand over hand, and did not draw breath till I was seated on the cross trees. The dirk had struck the mast not half a foot below me, and there stood Israel Hands with his mouth open and his face looking up at mine. Now that I had a moment to myself, I loaded my pistols. But Hans had also hauled himself into the shrouds. With the dirk in his teeth, he began slowly and painfully to climb. With a pistol in either hand, I addressed him. "One more step, Mr. Hans," said I, "and I'll shoot. Dead men don't bite, you know." He stopped instantly. I could see by his face that he was trying to think, and this was a slow process for him. His expression made me laugh aloud. He took the dirk from his mouth and said, "Jim, I don't have no luck, not I, but I reckon I'll have to strike. That comes hard, you see, for a master sailor to kill a boy like you, Jim." I was smiling, listening to him, and feeling cocky, when in a flash, back went his right hand over his shoulder. Something sang like an arrow through the air. I felt a blow and then a sharp pang, and there I was, pinned by the shoulder to the mast. In the horrid pain and surprise of the moment, both my pistols went off and both dropped out of my hands. They did not fall alone. With a choked cry, Israel Hands let go of the shrouds and plunged headfirst into the water. From my perch on the leaning cross trees, I could see him lying on the clean, bright sand as fishes swam over and around him. I felt sick, faint, and terrified. Hot blood was running over my back and chest. The dirk that pinned my shoulder to the mast burned like a hot iron. I clung with both hands till my nails ached, and I shut my eyes until I could regain my senses. The thought of pulling the dirk from my shoulder made me shudder. Oddly enough, the knife only held me by a mere pinch of skin, and the shudder tore the skin loose. I ripped my shirt away from the knife and climbed down the shrouds to the deck. I went below to my cabin and tended to my wound. Then I cleared the deck of its last passenger, the dead man, O'Brien. With one good heave, I tumbled him overboard. I could see him and Israel lying side by side under the water, and the quick fishes steering to and fro over them. All right, y'all, this is chapter 15, Pieces of 8. I was now alone upon the ship. The sun was setting and the sails were flapping in the evening breeze. I pulled down as many sails as I could so that they would not tear in the wind. I had to leave half of them attached. I scurried down the cut anchor rope, softly dropped into the waist-deep water, and waded ashore. I looked back at the Hispaniola. There she lay on her side with her mainsail trailing in the bay. But she was clear at last from pirates and ready for our own men to board and get to sea again. I couldn't wait to get to the stockade and boast of my tales. Gradually, the night fell blacker. The stars were few and pale. The bright moon rose over Spyglass Hill and lit my way. I came to the fence and looked into the stockade. Not a soul stirred. All was quiet. I climbed over the fence and crawled toward the blockhouse. Then I heard a wonderful sound, the snoring of my friends. At the doorway, I stood up and slowly walked through the darkness. With a silent chuckle, I pictured my friends' faces when they would wake in the morning and find me there. My foot struck something. It was a sleeper's leg. He turned and groaned, and then, all of a sudden, a shriek broke forth out of the darkness. "Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Silver's green parrot, Captain Flint." I had no time to think. The sleepers awoke and sprang up. The voice of Silver cried, "Who goes?" I turned, ran against one person, turned again, and ran full into the arms of someone else. "Bring a torch, Dick," said Silver. One of the men left and returned with a lighted torch. The red glare lit up the blockhouse. There I saw 6 ill-looking pirates and none of my friends. There sat the parrot on Long John's shoulder. "So," said he, "here's Jim Hawkins. Shiver me timbers. Dropped in like a..." Quite a pleasant surprise for poor old John. I made no answer. My back was against the wall. I looked Silver in the face, trying to look brave. Silver sat down and filled his pipe. "I've always liked you, Jim, I have," he said. "You're the picture of my own self when I was young and handsome. I always wanted you to join us. Your friends think you've left them. Ungrateful scamp," was what the doctor said. "They won't have you now. You'll have to join with Captain Silver." "You need an answer, then?" I asked with a trembling voice. My heart beat painfully in my chest. "Well, I have a right to know why you're here and where my friends are." One of the pirates growled and came at me, but Silver held him back and calmly said, "Yesterday morning, Mr. Hawkins, Dr. Livesey came to our camp with a flag of truce. Says he, Captain Silver, the ship's gone. We looked out, and by thunder, the old ship was gone. Well, says the doctor, let's bargain. We bargained, him and I, and here we are. We have the blockhouse. As for your mates, they've gone off. I don't know where they are." He quietly smoked his pipe. "And now I am to choose," said I. "And now you are to choose," said Silver. "Well," said I, "there's a thing or two I have to tell you. Here you are, ship lost, treasure lost, men lost, and if you want to know who did it, it was I. I was in the apple barrel the night we sighted land, and I heard you, John, and you, Dick Johnson, and Hans, who is now at the bottom of the sea, and told every word you said. And as for the ship, it was I who cut her loose, and it was I who brought her where you'll never see her more. Not one of you. The laugh's on my side. I no more fear you than I fear a fly. Kill me if you please, or spare me. But one thing I'll say, if you spare me, then we'll forget the past. And when you fellows are in court for being pirates, I'll save you all if I can. It is for you to choose." I was out of breath. The men sat staring at me like sheep. Then one sprang at me with a knife. "Avast, Tom Morgan," cried Silver. "Maybe you thought you was captain here. Cross me, and you'll go to Davy Jones below to feed the fishes." Morgan paused. The pirates murmured angrily. "I like that boy now," Silver went on. "He's more a man than any pair of rats of you in this here house. You'll not lay a hand on him." My heart was still going like a sledgehammer. Silver kept an eye on all the men, who went to the back of the room and talked in whispers. "Pipe up and let me hear you," snapped Silver. A yellow-eyed man spoke up. "Sir, this crew's dissatisfied. This crew has rights like other crews, and this crew wants to step outside for a council." One by one, the pirates saluted Silver and left the blockhouse. I was alone with Silver. "Now look you here, Jim Hawkins," he said in a steady whisper. "I know the game is up, and that I'll have to join back with the squire. As for that council, why, they'll depose me of being captain, they will. They're fools and cowards. But I'll save your life from them, lad, if you save Long John from hanging after I join back with your men. What I can do, that I'll do, I said. "It's a bargain," cried Long John. "Understand me, Jim. I know you've got that ship safe somewheres. How you done it, I don't know, but safe it is. And you and me, we might have done a power of good together." He paused. "Tell me, Jim, why did that doctor give me the map?" My face and mind went blank with surprise. "Ah, well, he did, though," said Silver. "And there's something fishy to that, Jim, there is." The door opened, and the 5 men came in. One man was pushed forward. "Step up, lad," cried Silver. "I won't eat you. Hand it over. I know the rules, I do." The young man passed something to Silver. "The black spot, I thought so," Silver said. "See what's wrote there," said George Merry, the man with the yellow eyes. "Then you can talk." "Thank ye, George. Well, what is it, anyway?" "Ah, deposed. That's it, is it? Did you write it, George? You'll be voted captain next, I'm sure. You're over now, Silver, and you'll maybe step down off that barrel and help vote." "I'm still the captain till I've had my chance to talk," roared Silver. "After that, we'll see." "You've made a hash of this cruise," snarled George Merry. "You let the enemy go for nothing. Then you wouldn't let us go at them as they left. And there's this here boy." "Is that all?" asked Silver quietly. Then he raised his voice. "Look here, I'll answer to you. Who was it that elected me captain? All of you here. And if you had done like I said at first, we'd have that treasure and the ship too. I'm sick to speak to you. I don't know why yet mothers let you come to sea." Silver was shouting by now. He wiped sweat from his brow. So you don't like my bargain with the enemy, eh? You don't even know my bargain. The doctor has agreed to come tend to this ragged lot. You, George, you're feverish from malaria. Your eyes are the color of lemon peel. You there with your head broke. You'll be glad when the doctor comes. And this boy here? Why, shiver my timbers, isn't he a hostage? Kill that boy. Not me, mates. When the rescue ship comes, we'll be glad to have this here hostage. And now, as to why I made the bargain with the squire, well, you came crawling on your knees to me to make it. You was so starved and sick, and there's more. I got this in the bargain. And he threw something down on the floor. It was the map. The pirates leaped upon that map like cats. They laughed and hooted and shouted, "Hooray for Silver! Barbecue for Captain!" "George, I reckon you'll have to wait another turn, friend," said Silver. That was the end of that awful night. Silver stayed as captain, and I stayed alive. All right, y'all, we're on chapter 16, The Doctor's Visit. We were awakened the next morning by a clear, hearty voice calling, "Ahoy! Here's the doctor." I ran to a loophole. Sure enough, it was the doctor. I felt ashamed to have him see me. "Top of the morning to you, sir," cried Silver. "George, help Dr. Livesey over. Your patients are happy to see you, doctor. And we've quite a surprise for you, too, sir. We've a little stranger here. He slept right alongside of me, he did." Dr. Livesey was over the fence and had come up to Silver. "Not Jim," I heard him say. "The very same Jim as ever was," said Silver. They came in. The doctor gave me a grim nod, but went straight to work with the sick men. He gave out medicine and changed bandages as if he were making a family visit. The fever, he said, came from sleeping in this horrid swamp. He finished his rounds, then spoke to Silver. "Well, that's done for today, and now I wish to have a talk with the boy, please." There was an uproar from the men, but Silver silenced them. He spoke quietly with the doctor, then said to me, "Hawkins, will you give me your word of honor not to slip your cable?" I gave him my pledge not to run. Silver told the doctor to go on over the fence. He barked to the grumbling men to get ready for the treasure hunt. Then, slowly, Silver and I made our way down to the fence. Once out of earshot, Silver explained to the doctor that he was once again on their side. He told how he saved my life and asked if the doctor and the squire would speak well of him if he went to trial for piracy. "You'll forget the bad now, won't you, doctor?" Silver asked with sad, pleading eyes. Then he stepped back, sat upon a stump, and whistled as he watched us in the blockhouse. "So, Jim," said the doctor sadly, "here you are. How could you run off, with Captain Smollett ill?" I will admit that I began to weep. "Doctor," I said, "you might spare me. I'm good as dead anyway, if they torture me." "Jim," the doctor interrupted. "Jim, I can't have this. Whip over and we'll run for it." "Doctor," said I gave my word." "You know right well you wouldn't break your word. Neither you nor squire nor captain. Nor will I. But, doctor, you did not let me finish. If they torture me, I might let slip a word of where the ship is. For I got the ship, and she lies in North Inlet." "The ship!" exclaimed the doctor. Quickly I described to him my adventures. After some silence, he said, "At every step, it's you that saves our lives, Jim. And do you suppose that we are going to let you lose yours? You overheard the plot? You found Ben Gunn. Oh, and speaking of Ben Gunn," seeing Silver walk over, he called out, "Silver, Silver, I'll give you a piece of advice. Don't you be in any great hurry after that treasure." "Why, sir," said Silver, "I can only save my life and the boys by seeking for that treasure." "Well, I'll not tell more," said the doctor, "but I will say, Silver, if we both get off this island, I'll do my best to save you from being hung for piracy." Silver's face was radiant. "You couldn't say more, sir, if you was my own mother," he cried. "Hear well my advice, Silver. Keep the boy close, and when you need help, call out, 'Hello!' I'm off to find help now. Goodbye, Jim." Dr. Livesey shook hands with me through the fence, nodded to Silver, and set off at a brisk pace into the woods. "Jim," said Silver, when we were alone, "I saved your life. You saved mine. I'll never forget it. I seen the doctor waving you to run for it, and I seen you say no. And now, Jim, we're to go in for this here treasure hunting, and I don't like it. You and me must stick close to save our necks." Chapter 17, y'all, the treasure hunt. At breakfast, Silver announced, "Aye, mates, I learned that they've hid the ship, but once we hit the treasure, we'll jump into our jolly boats and take that ship, we will. Until then, Mr. Hawkins here will be our hostage. I'll take him in a line when we go treasure hunting." The men were cheered, but I was downcast. I knew Silver would never join the squire if the pirates did get the treasure and the ship. I still could not understand why my friends had left the stockade. Why had they given the pirates the map? And what did the doctor's warning mean? That Silver should not be in a hurry to find the treasure. With an uneasy heart, I left with the pirates on the treasure hunt. We were an odd-looking bunch. The men carried picks and shovels and food and wore ragged clothes. All were armed to the teeth except me. Silver had 2 guns slung about him, besides the great cutlass at his waist and a pistol in each pocket of his square-tailed coat. Captain Flint sat perched upon his shoulder, gabbling sea talk. I had a rope about my waist and followed after Silver, who held the loose end of the rope, sometimes in his hand, sometimes in his teeth. For all the world, I was led like a dancing bear. We straggled to the beach where the 2 jolly boats awaited us. The plan was to row them to a landing spot close to where the treasure was marked on the map, and then follow the map clues. Tall tree, spyglass shoulder, bearing a point to the northeast, Skeleton Island, east-southeast, and by east, 10 feet. We landed at the mouth of the river that runs down the side of Spyglass Hill. There we got out and began our climb through the swampy ground. The land became steeper and stonier. Then we came to an area of sweet-smelling shrubs and thickets of nutmeg trees. Right before us was a flat area with tall pine trees on the shoulder of Spyglass Hill. One of these trees had to be the tall tree of Flint's map. The men spread out, shouting and leaping to and fro. I followed behind Long John Silver. From time to time I had to help him, or he would have missed his footing and fallen down the hill. After half a mile, we came to the edge of the flat area. Suddenly, one of the men began to cry out as if in terror. We ran forward, thinking the treasure was found, but then a chill struck every heart. There at the foot of a big pine lay a human skeleton, grown over with vines. The skeleton lay perfectly straight. His feet pointed in one direction. His hands were raised above his head like a diver's pointing in the other direction. Silver was the only one calm. "I'm thinking," he said. "The tip-top point of Skeleton Island seems to lie right along the line of them bones." The men checked the compass, and sure enough, the body pointed straight in the direction of the island, and the compass read east-southeast and by east. "I thought so," cried Silver. "This here is a pointer, one of Flint's jokes. It makes me cold to think of it. Him and those 6 was alone here, and he killed 'em all. This one he hauled here and laid down as a pointer. Shiver my timbers." "I saw Flint die with my own eyes," said Morgan. "Dead, aye. Sure enough, he's dead and gone below," said another. "But if ever a spirit walked, it would be Flint's. He died bad, did Flint." "Aye, that he did," said another. "First he raged, then he called for rum, then he sang. 15 men on the dead man's chest. He turned blue, he did." Come, said Silver. "Stow this talk. He's dead, and his spirit don't walk. Ahead to the gold." We started, but the pirates kept side by side and spoke in frightened whispers. Before us stood Spyglass Hill with many tall pine trees and cliffs. Silver took out his compass. "There are 3 tall trees to check," said he. "It should be easy enough to find the stuff now." "I don't feel easy," growled Morgan. "Thinking of Flint, I think, has done me." "He were an ugly devil," cried another pirate. All of a sudden, out of the trees in front of us, A high, trembling voice sang out, 15 men on the dead man's chest, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. I never have seen men more scared than those pirates. The color went from their 6 faces. Some leaped to their feet, some crawled hold of others. Morgan groveled on the ground. It's Flint, cried George Merry. The song stopped as suddenly as it began. Come, said Silver in a shaky voice. This won't do. I can't name the voice, but it's someone playing. You can bet on that. But then the same voice began wailing. Darby McGraw, Darby McGraw, again and again and again. Then, a little higher. Fetch the rum, Darby. The pirates were in absolute terror. They was Flint's last words, moaned Morgan. That fixes it, gasped one. Let's go. Shipmates, Silver cried. I'm here to get that gold, and I'll not be beat by man or devil. I never feared Flint in his life, and I'll face him dead. There's a treasure in gold not a quarter of a mile from here. I tell you, that weren't Flint's spirit. Come to think on it, said Mary, it wasn't just like Flint's voice after all. It was more like somebody else's voice, more like... By thunder, Ben Gunn, roared Silver. Aye, and so it were, cried Morgan. Ben Gunn's spirit it were. Why, nobody minds Ben Gunn, cried Mary. Dead or alive, nobody minds him. Soon they were chatting together and setting forth again. It was fine open walking up here. We could see out over the water, where I had tossed and trembled in the coracle. After checking a couple tall pines, we saw one that rose nearly 200 feet in the air. This had to be the tall tree. Somewhere beneath its shadow lay 700,000 in gold. The thought of the money erased any terror the men had felt. Their eyes burned in their heads. Their feet grew speedier just thinking of the treasure that lay waiting for each of them. Silver hobbled, grunting on his crutch. He cursed like a madman when the flies settled on his hot face. From time to time he yanked the rope and gave me a deadly look. I knew his thoughts. If he found gold, he would forget his promise to me and the doctor. He planned to seize the treasure and find the Hispaniola, cut every honest throat on that island, and sail away. We were now at the edge of the thicket. Hurrah, mates, all together, shouted Mary. They broke into a run, but then we saw them all stop. A low cry arose. Silver doubled his pace, digging away with the foot of his crutch. In the next moment, he and I also came to a dead halt. Before us was a deep pit. Down inside was a broken pickaxe and boards from broken crates. All was clear. The treasure had already been found. The 700,000 in gold was gone. The men looked like they had been struck, but I could see Silver's face hatching a new plan. Jim, he whispered, take that and stand by. He passed me a double-barreled pistol. Slowly, he led me to the other side of the pit. I could not help whispering, so you've changed sides again. The pirates cried and leaped into the pit to dig with their fingers. Morgan found one small coin. 1 coin, he roared, shaking it at Silver. That's your 700,000, is it? Dig away, boys, said Silver with a cool voice. You'll find some coppers, I should guess. Coppers, screamed Mary. Mates, do you hear that? I tell you now, that man there knew it all along. Look at his face. Ah, George, said Silver. Are you standing in as captain again? By this time, the others had scrambled out of the pit and stood with Mary. Well, there we stood, 2 on one side, 5 on the other. The pit between us. Silver never moved. He watched them upright on his crutch and looked as cool as ever I saw him. Mates, said Mary, there's 2 of them alone there. One's the old cripple that's blundered this whole thing. The other's that cub that I mean to have the heart of. Now, mates, he was raising his arm and his voice when crack, 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 3 musket shots flashed out of the thicket. Mary tumbled headfirst into the pit. The man with the bandage spun round like a top and fell on his side. The other 3 turned and ran for it with all their might. Before you could wink, Long John sent a shot into the struggling Mary. George, said Silver, I reckon I settled you. At the same moment, the Doctor Gray and Ben Gunn joined us with smoking muskets from out of the thicket. All right, y'all, we're at chapter 18 and last. Forward, cried the doctor. After him. They're headed to the boats. We set off, plunging through the bushes. I tell you, Silver was anxious to keep up with us. He leaped on his crutch till the muscles of his chest were fit to burst. From behind us, he called out, "Doctor, see there! No hurry!" We could see the 3 men running right for Mizzenmast Hill. We were already between them and the boats, and so we sat down to breathe. "Thank ye kindly, Doctor," Silver said, mopping his face. "You came in the nick of time for me and Hawkins." Then he added, "So it's you, Ben Gunn." "I'm Ben Gunn, I am," replied the Marine, wriggling like an eel. "And how do, Mr. Silver?" "Pretty well, I thank ye," says you. Ben, murmured Silver, "to think as you've done me." As we walked down to the boats, the doctor told us Ben Gunn's story, and what happened after he himself had gone to find Gunn that morning. Ben Gunn was the hero from beginning to end. In his long, lonely wanderings about the island, Gunn had found the skeleton and the treasure. He had dug it up and carried it on his back in many weary journeys from the foot of the tall pine to a cave he had at the northeast of the island. There it was, safely stored, and this he had told the doctor. When the doctor saw that the ship was no longer in the cove, thanks to me, he had gone to Silver to make a bargain. He asked that the pirates allow the squire's crew to leave the stockade in peace. In return, the doctor gave Silver the map, which was now useless, and promised food and supplies and medicine for the sick men. The bargain was made. My friends had left the stockade and headed to Ben Gunn's cave. The doctor had gotten Gray and Gunn to go with him to the site of the tall pine and the pit. Gunn ran ahead to stall his old shipmates, singing and calling out the words of Flint. When he came to the jolly boats, we destroyed one and got aboard the other to row the 8 miles to North Inlet. We passed the mouth of Ben Gunn's cave and saw the squire waving to us. We all gave him 3 cheers, including Silver. 3 miles farther, what should we meet but the Hispaniola, afloat and drifting? As it was, she was in good shape except for the mainsail. We attached another anchor and dropped it over. Then we rowed round near the cave and hiked up. The squire met us, glaring at Silver. "John Silver, I am. Told I am not to let you hang, but you're a monstrous villain and impostor." "Thank ye kindly, sir," replied Silver, saluting. The cave was a large, airy place overhung with ferns. Captain Smollett lay before a nice fire. In a far corner lay great heaps of coins and stacks of gold bars. Flint's treasure. Later, I would help to pack the coins. It was a strange collection, much like the coins that Billy Bones had. English, French, Spanish doubloons, and pieces of 8. There were round pieces, square pieces, and pieces with holes in the middle. Nearly every kind of money in the world, I think. Sadly, I thought of the 17 from our crew that had died for that treasure. What a meal I had with my friends that night, with salted goat and a bottle of old wine from the Hispaniola. Never were people brighter or happier, and there was Silver, joining in the laughter and lending a hand, just like his sea cook days. The next morning, we began to cart the gold to the jolly boat. Gray and Gunn then made trips to the ship. Day after day this work went on, with no sign of the 3 pirates. On the 3rd night, the doctor and I heard their far-off singing. Drunk, said Silver. "Malaria," said the doctor. A council was held, and it was decided that we must desert them on the island, to the huge glee, I must say, of Ben Gunn. We left a good stock of gunpowder and shot, most of the salted goat, and a few medicines, some tools, clothing, a spare sail, and rope. At last, one fine morning, we pulled up the anchor. High above flew the flag that the captain had flown and fought under at the stockade. Rounding the island, we saw something that grabbed our hearts. All 3 of the Marine men were kneeling with their arms raised, calling for God's sake, "Don't leave us to die in such a place." The doctor shouted out where we had left food and supplies. One leaped to his feet with a hoarse cry and sent a musket shot whistling over Silver's head and through the mainsail. That was at least the end of that. Before noon, to my joy, the highest rock of Treasure Island had sunk into the blue round of sea. We all worked double shifts and safely sailed to Spanish America. The doctor, the squire, and I went ashore to the happy faces of the islanders and the wonderful sights and smells of tropical fruits. When we returned to Hispaniola, Ben Gunn told us that Silver was gone. He had gotten one of the sacks of coins and slipped away. I think we were all pleased to be so cheaply rid of him. Well, to make a long story short, we got a few new hands on board and reached Bristol just as Mr. Blandley was thinking of sending a rescue ship. All of us had a share of the treasure. Captain Smollett is now retired from the sea. Gray not only saved his money, but he is now part owner of a fine full-rigged ship, married besides, and the father of a family. As for Ben Gunn, he spent or lost his share in 3 weeks, so the squire gave him a gatekeeper's job. Folks made fun of his ways, but he has become a favorite singer in church on Sundays. Of Silver, we have heard no more. That seafaring man with one leg has at last gone clean out of my life. I would guess he lives in comfort with a wife and his parrot, Captain Flint. For all I know, the rest of the silver bars and the weapons marked on the map still lie where Flint buried them. Certainly, I will never look for them. Oxen and ropes would not bring me back to that accursed island. And the worst dreams I ever have are when I hear the surf booming about its coasts or spring upright in bed with the sharp voice of Captain Flint still ringing in my ears. Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8!